Okay, my friends, we're live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another brand new episode, a very special episode of this Enlightenment podcast, where we have joined with us a Buddhist monk, a real life, authentic Buddhist monk. Today, I have some questions to ask him, and we're going to delve deep into spirituality, mysticism, and the unknown. So, without further ado, Bante, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So, the first thing that I feel called to ask you is what made you become a Buddhist monk? What inspired you to take this drastic decision in your life?
I get asked this question a lot, and I haven't quite come up with as good of an answer as I'd like to be able to give. But I found, somehow I knew in myself that this was uh, the most suitable path for me to live, focused entirely on spirituality and spiritual life. And I even getting success in like a business world and being able to take care of myself financially, I found that that didn't support how seriously I wanted to be about the spiritual path in life. So I already had experiences with Buddhism and meditation, and it was just kind of a logical next step to ordain and become a monk.
What would you say is the most difficult aspect of being a Buddhist monk?
For me, it's actually a there's some drive or there's some push habitually towards tension and towards struggle and towards striving. And being a monk makes that seem to be very silly, very pointless, because I don't have to work to make money. I don't have to sell my time. I don't have to make deals with people so that I can have a place to live, so that I can have food to eat, and so that I can be in a spiritually protected environment. So there's not much reason to be stressed. And somehow that's very difficult to sit with and to be with and to live with, that I don't have any reason to be stressed. I don't have any reason to struggle or to worry about things.
You kind of answered my second question, which would be what is the most blissful or positive experience of being a Buddhist monk? Maybe something that most people wouldn't mm, think of or consider.
Yeah, it's twofold. Uh, One hand is the robustness of the community and the robustness of the society that is built around and established in supporting people who want to be monks and nuns or yogis for the rest of their life, and like how robust that is very blissful. And the other hand or the other side What was the question?
The most positive aspect of being a Buddhist monk.
Ah, to be in these spiritually protected environments. And there's just for most people who are on the path, Westerners and Americans, there's no idea, there's no understanding that these kind of environments exist. That where the evil spirits or the people who are fueled by greed, anger, and delusion, the people that want to debate, the people that want to be aggressive, the people that want to control, just can't reach these places. That there are places you can only reach and be in according to blessings, and that there's nothing to do with money in it. It doesn't matter how much money you pay, you can't be at many of these spaces that a monk can be in or a nun can be in without so many blessings. So it's blissful to know that those places exist. And it's another kind of reason why I don't need to stress. I don't need to worry. I don't need to be afraid of my own mind or like the psychosphere of American culture, American society, or societies that don't have reverence for spiritual life and the spiritual path. Uh, and it's something I like to convey to people and make it clear that this is available, because if you really strive and struggle and get a little bit of success in the spiritual life, it's likely that you're going to be more sensitive, more vulnerable, more open. And what you're going to be open to if you're just living and working at a job in America or in a society that doesn't value spirituality and your path, it's not unlikely that you will get sick and that you will, go through a lot of difficulties that are unnecessary, and then make choices that don't align with your path and, break your own heart.
Understood. Well said. My next question is, how important is it to have a spiritual teacher? What role does a spiritual teacher play in your life or in a seeker's life?
Yeah. Well, as much as you are serious about practicing generosity, doing good deeds, as much as you are serious about being virtuous, then the door of meditation or cultivation opens, like real, what we call real spiritual practice opens. If you're not serious about generosity, if you're not serious about doing good deeds, if you're not serious about being virtuous, which means doing more of what you should do and doing less of what you shouldn't do, then the spiritual path isn't really accessible for you. And you're just going to get all kinds of troubles and sufferings and complications in the mind, or a waste of energy, or like disassociation. So the spiritual teacher or the spiritual community is so important because it gives us these uh, uh, supportive conditions and encouragements and pointers out about what we need to personally prioritize. And what we need to personally prioritize usually doesn't have anything to do with what we want to get. So it's surrender, it's sacrifice, it's giving, it's volunteering, it's serving that most of us need to do, all of us need to do to enter into the spiritual life. And when we come across the spiritual ideas, but we don't have a relationship with surrender or service or virtue, it just becomes a mess. And we don't get to actually get our wish. We don't actually get to get the enlightenment or the success. So we're always going to, we're not going to walk a perfect line or a perfect path, but we have to have something to come back to that's reliable. We have to have some refuge to come back to. And that's the role that the spiritual teacher and also the spiritual sangha represents for us. And in a practical way, that is monks and nuns or realized yogis, and in Buddhism we call that the sangha. So most enlightened people are going to be monks, nuns, or yogis. Most of them are going to be monks or nuns, because the more you get onto the path of enlightenment, the more of um, exceptionalism that you embody. And it's not an exclusive exceptionalism, it's actually an all inclusive exceptionalism, but it leads you down a path where you say, well, wait a minute. I don't want to make all of these interpersonal transactions and contracts with people for money, for power, for fame, for being recognized in a certain way. And so the only way that you can do that really is to abandon the life of a business person, or to abandon the life of a householder. If you want to get the enlightenment, if you want to be a happier, more blessed, more peaceful, and more spiritual person, well, then you mainly need to focus on generosity, doing good deeds, being virtuous, and practicing meditation concerned with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, or the spiritual community, the virtuous way of life, and doing our best to cultivate with guidance. Because when you cultivate without guidance, it's just like trying to build a house without uh, having experience as a carpenter, or having experience working with that field.
Talk to me about food. How is it like to eat one meal a day or however many meals you eat? Do you crave food? Do you think about food? How is your relationship to food?
So you can eat whatever you want, but you should be vegan. And concerned with the spiritual life, you have to work on detachment from food. You have to work on being with that sense of hunger without being controlled and manipulated and fully driven by that sense of hunger. It's very important to practice that way and to work with our desires, our basic desires, our fundamental desires, like sleep, like hunger, like sexual drive, to where we can detach from that. We can practice brahmacharya. We can forgive. We can fast from food. We can fast from sleeping. We can fast from sexual activity. And it's very, very important, if you want to do that seriously, it's very, very important that you take refuge in a community, and you take refuge under the guidance of a teacher in one way or another. And that teacher should be a monk or a nun or an established yogi. And as we go further on this path, we should naturally be identifying more and more monks and nuns, yogis, and spiritual teachers that are well known and well supported and well recognized. And then we will have kind of a structure to check things against. Now you have gold standards. You have people like Sadguru. You have people like Ajahn Brahm. You have people like Thich Nhat Hanh. You have people in this dimension, and you want to look towards those people. You want to take refuge in those people, and then you can see what else is going on, what other people are saying. But if you're just living your spiritual path by looking at this person, looking at that person, and kind of getting involved and talking about spirituality, you'll never get anywhere. You'll never make any success, because it's like children primarily trying to learn from other children. The reason that's happening is because there aren't active, healthy, robust adults with emotional regulation around that can support those children and be examples for them. And this is the issue that we're finding in the Western spiritual sphere. And it's a big sphere. It's a lot of people, but that there are not many people who have much experience on the path. And so all of these speakers and all of these people that are trying to get on the path are basically just looking towards each other, and they're not looking towards real teachers and real communities. So it's a major part of my work to try and go and take refuge in these spiritually protected communities and spaces, to develop myself, to sacrifice, to surrender, to go through, you know, eating shit and drinking piss, so that I can have this inner alchemy of transforming suffering and then bringing that back to whoever I come across, especially young Western men who need a lot of support and need a lot of help. But that is always, that work and that practice, me doing that, is always in reference to me being protected and supported by a spiritual community. I don't take refuge in going around and connecting with people and building up my own thing. I take refuge in the well-established community of spiritual practitioners. Mangalaba, Kyoshmin Baze, Kankao Baze, Kuyara Wanta Bade. Show you. Udo, 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 Udo. Udo, Udo. Oh, 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 oh. Oh. Yeah. Oh. Oh. Okay, so okay, good. Are we still connected, Shiva?
Yes, yes, we are.
And yeah, so that's, going back to what I was talking about, that there really is this robust spiritual community and communities and cultures out there that just don't have much of anything to do with the West. And we have to kind of swallow that bitter pill. We have to accept that to make use and to take refuge in these communities because they're happy to have us, but we tend to have a mindset as Westerners where we're too egoic, we're too arrogant, and it keeps us from generosity, it keeps us from giving, and it keeps us from surrender unto something that's greater than us, which is actually not something, right? It's what we want. It's the bliss, it's the freedom, it's the beyond. Um, so we have to just be more open to being generous. And there's often this confusion that comes up when I talk about that, like, oh, well, this guy just won't stop talking about generosity. He wants donations. He needs to pay for his car payment. He needs to pay for his house payment. He needs to get what he wants, right? But I'm a part of a spiritual community. I don't really need anything from anyone. And my part of my sadhana is not to ask anything from anyone as much as possible, you know? But there's a lot of confusion that's going to be there and a lot of frustration that's going to be there until we surrender, until we give, until we sacrifice. And then as much as we can sacrifice, we will meet our karmic difficulties, or we will meet those teachers of situations that we also have to be mindful of, detach from, come back, and then continue. So it's never getting into complacency. It's never stopping. It's just that was your teacher at that moment, and that's the continuation point, right? And we refresh and restart through that continuously. And a lot of times the lesson and the teaching is to be patient, right? That we have that sense of to get it quickly and to go into it and full bore. But actually what we need to do is rest and detach and do what we can do now. And also to not do anything, which is maybe even more important.
Do you think it's possible to become enlightened living as a householder, regular life, having a
This
job?
is yeah. Yeah, this is the American problem. And of course the American problem is spreading all over the world, right? So there are Michael Jordans. There are LeBron James. So LeBron James or Michael Jordan went from high school to the NBA. Yeah, that's possible. But you didn't even play high school basketball. Not you personally, but in this analogy, right? You didn't even play high school basketball. How are you LeBron James, right? You're 5'4", etc., whatever, right? So we have to get out of this mindset, this American mindset of being disenfranchised millionaires. We really have to let that go. We really have to be more willing to just be a normal person. And for normal people, you have to join a spiritual community. You have to renounce. You have to surrender. You have to become a monk or a nun or a yogi or a devotee to get onto the path of enlightenment and to realistically be able to get the enlightenment. So it's possible, but it's unlikely to a degree where I even wonder if I should say that it's possible. It's just like all these people that think it's possible to win the lottery or it's possible to become a millionaire. Well, yeah, it's possible for for any individual person in the slums of India or the slums of Mumbai to become the slumdog millionaire. Yeah, that's possible, but it's not going to happen. So we have to accept that and digest that, and also to understand that this seeking and desire for you to become enlightened or for someone to become enlightened is impossible. Someone can't become enlightened. That's the nature of enlightenment. That's the entry into enlightenment, is that you realize, oh my goodness, I'm not someone. Uh, and you have to go through that surrendering process to really see that, because you have to be willing to abandon your life. So you're going to be very limited in your capacity to even entertain the notion of abandoning your life, let alone to do the sadhana of that, living as a layperson, living with a business, living with a family, etc. And so the teaching or the invitation and the encouragement is that you can get involved with, you can get concerned with the community of enlightened beings, or the community that is containing and protecting and supporting enlightening beings, which is going to be the community of monks and nuns, the Sangha, the community of yogis, the well established meditation center or spiritual community, etc. You have to take refuge in that. Sadhguru is kind of a Sadhguru is kind of a, a a falcon in the storm, because really outside of like Sadhguru, there's not many well-established traditions of spirituality that are accessible for becoming a monk or a nun or a yogi outside of Buddhism, because there's just so many opportunities in Buddhism. It's still exceedingly difficult. But we have to go towards some organization like that. If we just show up at some ashram, if we just show up at some random temple, yeah, we might be able to become a monk or a nun, but the systems aren't in place to actually train us. And we may actually be encouraged to disassociate and take on this enlightened role that we actually don't have much experience with, and that we isn't actually very respective of who we are, which is a lot of people fall into that trap. So it's very important that we form a direct connection with someone we feel we can trust, who's on the path, who can support us and give us guidance, etc. It's very, very important. It's of the utmost importance for everyone to practice in that way, you know, if you can.
Talk to me about Sadhguru. How did you find Sadhguru and what do you think of him?
Well, it's an interesting story, because a lot of Buddhist monks and Buddhist people would probably never talk about Sadhguru or never mention him, especially someone who's in a teaching role and then to be mentioning Sadhguru. But I was actually recommended Sadhguru multiple times years ago, towards the beginning of my monastic life or my yogi life. And it was recommended to me from a very high Chan Bhikshuni in the Taiwan Zen tradition. And I was wondering, why is this bhikshuni, why is this nun, this female monk, sending me these videos? And I would click and I'd look and I'd see Sadhguru's fancy clothes and I'd see his beard and I'd see his presence. I say, he doesn't really get it. He's not a Buddhist. I'm sure it's fine because this person's recommending, but that's not for me. And somehow over time, she kept recommending that and pointing me in that direction. And I took some time to listen to Sadhguru and be kind of open, generous, receptive, subtle to what was being conveyed. And I just, I found for myself that listening to Sadhguru actually put me into some deep meditation experiences, and that he had a lot of practical wisdom for modern people and for Western influenced peoples. So it's one of my aspirations, to make the time to visit Isha, to possibly, see Sadguru, and just to see what's going on with their organization, because it is very robust, and I think it's quite a strong institution of spiritual practice and enlightening beings. It's not Buddhist per se, but Isha Foundation is a good recommendation, because we're always falling into this idealism, and I've come across so many people, young men usually, or some young women, that are considering about finding a way to join a monastery or join a temple or to become a monk or a nun, and they're kind of like looking for a vacation resort. And it gets back to this fundamental problem of not having a relationship with generosity, where the person who's asking the question thinks that they're doing a favor to the person who's answering it. And it's just a very, very confusing situation. The power is in giving. The power is in sacrifice. The power is in the releasing and relaxing of the whole body and mind, or whatever attachment is bound up at that moment. And that's where the wisdom is, in that, in the freedom of that and not that already. Um, so, if you can go to a place like Sadhguru's Isha Foundation, that's probably going to be great. And in the same way, if you can find any temple, any monastery, and I recommend Buddhism because it's a little bit more specific and it's a little bit more secular, um, where you can go and train and practice, become a monk or a nun or something temporarily, then you should try to do that. And that if you're a Western person that has finances, like if you live in America, if you live in a Western country, and you are able-bodied, you can save up a couple $1,000. And so what should you use that $1,000 for? A couple $1,000 if you're a real spiritual seeker. You should use that to go and explore the spiritual path, to go and stay at a monastery, to go and stay at an ashram, and be serious about it. And don't think that you're doing them a favor by going there. And that's subconscious. That's subconscious greed patterns that are expressing themselves. So the only way that you cannot fall into that mindset is to go there from a place of giving, go there from a place of serving, go there from a place of volunteering, not going there to get what you want.
What do you think enlightenment is?
Well, first and foremost, and most importantly, enlightenment is not a thing. And if enlightenment is anything for me, it's the peaceful freedom of continuous, instantaneous mindfulness and detachment that is imbued with doing limitless good deeds continuously, together with everything, something along those lines. But it's not something, and someone cannot become enlightened. So the Buddha is not someone. And Sadhguru would say, I think he said in his recent going back to India or something, he was like, none of this is me anymore. This is all you. Right? And that shouldn't be an encouragement to disassociate. Enlightenment is nothing. I'm enlightened, da 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 da, like that. But you you really embody the spirit of generosity and being good and doing good and watching over the mind and being virtuous. And to the degree that you want to be enlightened, that's to the degree that you have to surrender and to give and to serve and to release and relax the whole body and mind. It's not about doing anything or being anyone. So, like for me, on my path of or towards enlightenment or whatever, this, doing this interview and when I do live streams and when I talk with people, it's just my practice methodology. Because when I do that, when I'm around people that are interested in the spiritual path, I can practice generosity. I can share my experience. And then as much as my ego is getting involved, my ego is getting involved concerned with doing good deeds with mindfulness and detachment for all, concerned with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And that's very reliable. So I can take refuge in that rather than taking refuge in, well, you know, maybe I shouldn't be saying anything, or maybe I should say this, or maybe I should say that. Just do good deeds more and more. Just wake up, drink a raw egg, have your espresso, shake your body around, get in the cold, freezing cold ice bath or whatever, and then start doing good deeds with mindfulness and detachment, period. And if you can, concerned with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, or concerned with the spiritual path. You do have to be careful, but being careful is not as important as doing your best to do good deeds more and more with mindfulness and detachment.
Talk to me what the role is of the five moral precepts or morality in the Buddha's teachings and in spirituality as a
Yeah.
whole.
Okay, so until you practice giving, until you practice donating, until you practice volunteering, until you practice serving, until you practice to do good deeds in this way of giving away what's valuable to you, you cannot regulate anything in terms of your mental, physical, or verbal actions. It's completely and totally impossible because you are in a state of constant reactivity. You like this, so you go towards that. You don't like this, so you try to avoid that. You don't like that, so you try to avoid it. When we give, it means that you're constantly in a state of ignorance and attachment all the time, and you don't have any control over your body mind experience. You can't do anything, you can't spiritually practice. So, the giving is this mechanism, is this practice where you have something valuable that you are attached to, whether it's your money or your skilled time or whatever it is, and you give that away willingly. So you're exercising this modality of mindfulness because you're aware of what you're holding on to, and detachment because you give it away. So, firstly, we have to exercise and practice with that. Now, once we can start to practice with that, we can start to work with the precepts, which means we take on a responsibility to not do what we can do. So we can kill bugs, but we make a vow to not kill. Um, or we can steal. We can take what's not offered to us, right? But also, we cannot do that. We can be free from doing that. We can speak harshly. We can lie. We can speak in a deceiving way, but we don't have to do that. So we can not do that. We can commit sexual misconduct, and this can have many cultural values in it as well. So you have to look at what your own practice is in relationship to sexuality. But the basic practice is that you should be very careful, exceedingly mindful, exceedingly considerate doing anything as it relates to sexual energy. And it's very difficult, and that's why we can work with like fasting, we can work with brahmacharya, we can work with celibacy. But not doing sexual misconduct is not about never having sexual experiences. It's just this level of carefulness that we bring to it. And fifthly and finally, not taking intoxicants. That's primarily talking about alcohol, and it's primarily talking about weed. So anything that intoxicates the mind, like what Sadguru would say, they call it getting high, but actually it's getting low. So if you want to walk on the spiritual path, you cannot be drinking alcohol as a habit or as a practice, and you cannot be smoking weed as a habit or as a practice. It's never going to take you anywhere. Now, yes, there are psychedelic medicines, there's ayahuasca, and there's a lot of information from the field of Western science that these can be healing and practical and helpful. But if you look at, because I've gone out and I've looked at some of these ayahuasca shaman adjacent communities and people, it doesn't work. It's not reliable. It's not sustainable. It's not something that you can take refuge in. So it can be used as a medicine. Western science is saying that, but it's not something that we can kind of go beyond inherently and naturally. by using it. So we have to detach from it. Anything that we can use, we can detach from. And our Western cultural, materialistic values don't really provide a conducive environment for relaxing and releasing the whole body and mind in that, which is why we have to go out, we have to renounce, we have to take refuge in the spiritual communities that are well established. And you'd be better to focus on Sadguru and better to be focused on, some Buddhist adjacent communities that are as simple and humble and basic as possible, because you don't want to get wrapped up in some kind of cult or what have you.
Who do you think the Buddha was? Can you share some thoughts about the Buddha?
But like I said before, the Buddha is not someone. So that clears out a lot of the meandering thoughts or grasping related to the Buddha and what the Buddha represents. So the Buddha is not someone. Inasmuch as Siddhartha Gautama was someone, he was someone who went very deeply and seriously into the world of renunciation, into the world of um, uh, doing serious meditation practices, studying with serious meditation masters, and practicing a lot with asceticism. And eventually, he realized that none of this was working. He sat under the Bodhi tree and he became enlightened, or free from something, free from someone, free from some situation, free from some experience, free from some time. And in that, he released attachment to anything and everything. And his way and his nature was now completely mindfulness and detachment.
Those are all the questions that I have for you today, Bante. Thank you for taking the time answering these questions, and I hope I can have you on another time where we delve deeper and I ask you more questions.
Yeah, and Shiva, you're welcome to put my YouTube channel link in the description of this video. And also, I'm always hanging around in the Shiva Shambho Discord server, which is very nice. I've had a lot of good experiences there, so you're welcome to come and tag me. Monk is my name there, to ask some questions or just hang out in the VC and practice some sadhana together. Okay, so I just want to finish by offering a blessing to everyone. Uh, May we all be peaceful in what is already. May we be free from the suffering of grasping and attachment to things, whether they be physical sensations in the body or whether they be mental thought objects. May we be free from grasping onto the identity of being someone. And may we walk the path with a real awareness and a real faith in freedom from someone, from something, from someplace, from some time, from some situation. May all things come to an end, and may Nibbana, peaceful awareness, pervade everywhere, and may we be protected and safe. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you very much.